Hello there. Few things before we start. Number one, these are my favorite primary beam weapons, not yours. If you don't like them, that's okay. 2, I'm running corrosive projection on my arrows, stripping away a little bit of the enemy armor. And 3, I'm running 3 vigilante mods on my companion's weapon, so if you see a random orange or a red grid on a weapon that shouldn't hit it, this is why. The first weapon on our list was an absolute no-brainer. It may not be the strongest weapon in the world, but there is no way in hell I am not putting it as one of the top 3 beam weapons. The one and only Ignis Wraith. I've tried many different builds on the Ignis over the years, but the one I like the most at the moment is this one right here, with Galvanized Chamber, Aptitude and Scope, Primary Merciless for a bunch of extra damage, Vital Sense for crit damage, Rime rounds and Malignant Force for Viro, and then Thermite rounds for heat. Now for the final slot, you have a couple of options. Hunter Munitions or Hammer Shot are decent damage across all the factions, but you could also run a Primed Bane mod to do extra sweaty damage against a specific faction. You could also run Primed Shred or any other Fire Rate mod for bonus fire rate, or you could simply run Primed Firestorm for a little bit of extra AoE. I also like to run Rifle Ammo Mutation here, but it's not entirely necessary because the ammo pickup on the Ignis Wraith is pretty good. Now, even though a lot of people use the Ignis Wraith because of its absolutely fantastic AoE, its single target damage isn't too shabby either once it's fully stacked up with a proper endgame build. It's not the strongest weapon in the world, but I definitely wouldn't call it weak. It can absolutely get you through Steel Path, and it even deals with Eximus units fairly well without you going into full-on sweaty mode with Primed Bane mods. The best thing about it is that even though it might take a while to take down some of the beefier enemies in Steel Path, the Ignis Wraith drains ammo so slowly you're basically never gonna run out, especially if you run Rifle Ammo Mutation. I would highly recommend you bring in a solid sidearm though, because the Ignis Wraith doesn't play well with status-resistant enemies, so if you run into an Acolyte, you're gonna have a bad time. All in all, a fantastic farming weapon with great AoE and solid single target DPS. In at number 2, we have yet another no-brainer. I think we all expected these two weapons to be on the list. It is the absolutely magnificent Phantasma Prime. Now the build here is actually a little bit different from a lot of other weapons, as we actually go for Viro and Electricity. We started off with Galvanized Hell, Savvy and Acceleration, as well as Primary Merciless. We followed that up with Toxic Barrage and Frigid Blast for Viro, and then we go big on Electricity with Prime Charge Shell and Shell Shock. And to top it all off, we run a Faction mod as well as Shotgun Barrage for a bunch of extra fire rate. Now, if you're gonna take this into high-level content, which you probably will, don't be a dumb bastard like me and swap out Galvanized Acceleration with Primed Shotgun Ammo Mutation, as the only thing this thing shreds faster than the enemies is its own ammo supply. Using electricity as your primary source of damage can feel a bit strange at first because of the way electricity works. It's basically nothing, 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 and then a massive tick happens that does a truck ton of damage. The Phantasma Prime is an absolute monster of a beam weapon. The damage it does is just disgusting. And since we're primarily using electricity to do our damage, it does it in a decently sized area as well, because electricity procs chain around. But the ammo economy is a bit wonky, even with Primed Shotgun Ammo Mutation, because of how fast this weapon chews through its own ammo supply, and it does basically nothing to status-resistant enemies. It is absolutely required to run a sidearm if you want to do something like Steel Path, because this thing doesn't even tickle Acolytes. With the Ignis, you can still take the Acolytes down. It's gonna take you a while, but eventually they will go down. With this, you just can't. So bring something like the Strophard that can blow them away in just a couple of hits. Now, I had absolutely no idea which weapon I should put at number 3, because a lot of the beam weapons are very good, but in the end, I ended up giving it to the criminally underused Synapse. There are a few different ways in which you can build the Synapse because of how damn strong it is. This has some of the best single target damage in the entire game. The build I use runs Galvanized Chamber, Scope and Aptitude, and I run Primary Deadhead for the damage and extra headshot multiplier. I followed that up with Malignant Force and Rime Round so that we end up with Corrosive and Viral, an absolutely fantastic combo. And then I run a Primed Bane mod for extra sweaty damage, Vital Sense for crit damage, and then either Hunter Munitions for slash procs or Point Strike to double down on crit chance. The reason I don't always run Hunter Munitions is because unless you're doing some very deep endgame, those slash procs aren't gonna do a damn thing. So I usually just switch into Point Strike so I get more crit chance. Doing that just gives you more upfront damage, and I can't even properly show you how strong that is in the Simulacrum, as all the enemies simply die too fast. It is, however, pure single target, though you could also go with electricity, just like on the Phantasma, to get a little bit of extra AoE, but I feel like if you're using the Synapse, you probably want big single target deeps. This weapon's biggest weakness, i.e. its single target focus, is also its biggest strength. The only reason it's allowed to be this strong is because it has no AoE. If this weapon had any amount of AoE on it, it would be the most most overpowered thing in the world. Its single target damage is absolutely gross. It drains ammo so slowly you could do a 20-minute survival without getting a single ammo pack and you'd be fine, and it feels nice to use as well. It does struggle a little bit against the Acolytes, especially if you're running the damage over time version, because they're also relatively difficult to consistently headshot, but if you're running the big boy crit build, you're gonna take them down in no time whatsoever. It's definitely head and shoulders above the other two weapons on this list. Now, this time around, I actually have another weapon that I have to give an honorable mention to, because you see, I've played Warframe for over 5,000 hours on Steam. And in those 5,000 hours, I've used one weapon more than any other. About 10% of my time spent playing Warframe was spent having fun with this weapon. It's Synapse's AoE brother, the Amprex. The build is pretty straightforward once again. We start with Galvanized Chamber, Scope and Aptitude, and we run Primary Merciless. We then double down on crit with Point Strike and get some crit damage with Vital Sense. We top it all off by running Rhyme Rounds and Malignant Force for Vital and Hunter Munitions for Slash procs. The reason the Amprex didn't quite make it onto the list is because it's sort of a mixture between the Ignis Wraith and the Phantasma Prime, but it's unfortunately objectively worse than both of them. The single target is better than the Ignis, but worse than the Phantasma, and the AoE is better than the Phantasma, but worse than the Ignis. It sits right in between. It also serves as a reminder that just because a weapon didn't make it onto the list doesn't mean it's bad. I will happily take the Amprex over any of the 3 weapons that I've put on this list because I just like it more. I genuinely debated myself on whether to give the 3rd spot to the Amprex or the Synapse, but the Synapse just won. Its single target damage is ridiculous, and also, this is something I didn't mention, the Synapse has maxed out Riven disposition, so you can get absolutely gross Rivens and make the damage even more ridiculous. But anyway, I think that's enough blabbering for today, so I thank you very much for watching as always, guys. Let me know what are your favorite primary beam weapons in the comment section down below, and I'll see you next time. Bye bye.